Hello, welcome to MJR RPG, a podcast for tabletop role-playing game reviews, replays, etc., and whatnot. This is a review for the Call of Cthulhu scenario, One Less Grave, which is the third entry in Type 40's Seeds of Terror, a series of concise one-off scenarios that can be run in 1 to 3 hours. You can read the text version of this review over on mjrrpg.com. As always, a narrative replay of my run of this scenario will come out in the coming week, or just hop onto the next episode if you're from the future. The first part of this review is safe for players with minimal spoilers. Midway through, I'll chase them all off, just so us keepers can talk shop without ruining anything for our prospective victims. In short, this is a wonderfully bizarre yet simple little scenario. No extra prep is really necessary, it's able to fit in a tight time schedule, and it's great for most groups, though maybe too lean for those expecting deep investigation. While all of the Seeds of Terror scenarios so far have been concise, this may be the most concise of the lot. After a single read-through, a keeper should be ready to run it without any extra prep, and most groups could finish it within 2 hours if nothing is added. It's simpler than both The Mummy of Pemberley Grange and Endless Light, though in its own way is more open-ended. And similar to its predecessors, One Less Grave is also location-restricted and time-sensitive, though to an even more extreme degree. The cast of investigators is well-rounded, varied despite keeping in theme. Most are students, all are young romantics, and also quite funny, giving plenty of ammunition for roleplay. Some of the characters do seem to have received more attention than others, though, with more sections of their backstory filled out. Its handouts are also beautiful. Besides the detailed and lived-in looking maps, the artist, Simon Liesemann, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, in particular did a standout job on 3 particular pieces that are the backbone of the whole scenario. They fit the setting and theme just perfectly. As an aside about setting and theme, I appreciate the extra details throughout the text, including hyperlinks to Wikipedia pages explaining specific terms. My favorite scenarios are ones that focus on some place, time, or idea that I don't know much about, and take some extra page space to explain that theme. If books, movies, and video games can educate while also being entertaining, so can RPGs. If your group is looking for an exciting, 2-hour game quite different from the usual Call of Cthulhu scenario, One Less Grave will not do you wrong. Even better, save it for a Halloween game. Find some pictures of spooky churches, set up a speaker with some particular songs, more on that below, and have a spooky good time. From here on out, full spoilers, only for keepers. This scenario greatly benefits with some additional stage dressing. Beforehand, you could write out some extra descriptive sentences for the walk to the church, the walk through the graveyard, inside the church itself, and in the crypt. Maybe with some stock pictures of old Catholic churches, if you can get some. Background sounds of light rain or wind would also well suit the ramp-up. Once the dance begins, I played loops of Camille Saint-Saens Danse Macabre, again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and Franz Liszt's Totentanz, again, pronunciation, no idea, blasting away to really drive home the frantic and bizarre scenes that play out until the end of the scenario. And boy howdy, does it get weird. I always start off one-shots with pre-gen characters by having the players give a short introduction of the investigators and describing how they are acting in an opening scene. In The Mummy of Pemberley Grange, it was the investigators entertaining themselves, waiting in a library. In Endless Light, it was the sailors working a routine ship ride. And in One Less Grave, it was the group of friends sauntering through a small English town at night. I had great players on my run, and they all fell into their characters quickly. While some of the investigators have less background information than others, I think most groups would still be able to find the role-playing voices with this quirky little bunch. The insufferable Wilf, and his revolver with 1 bullet being a nice touch, and gentle giant Jimbo were standouts. The actual progression and beats of this scenario are extremely simple. The party enters the church and goes to the crypt, looks around for a bit, then the Danse Macabre begins. The dead start jiving, and the investigators have to figure out what the murals are telling them, or get boogied to an early grave. I absolutely love how weird the mental image is of skeletons dancing around and piping away some jaunty tune, trying to nab investigators and dance their bones out. Definitely not the ghouls that some players might expect in a graveyard-based Cthulhu scenario, or the regular zombies that would be the non-Lovecraftian twist in other scenarios. Nope, dancing medieval skeletons. There's only a single solution, with no way to fight their way out. The investigators must bury themselves, and there is, of course, one less grave than there are investigators. While there are plenty of hints to guide the players to this solution, even more so if they know the name of the scenario, if they are stumbling, an idea roll can be used once things are appropriately dire. Maybe once a PC has been turned into a skeleton, or some are suffering bouts of madness, the idea roll could be suggested, with a success giving players a blatant hint that folk in the painting that buried themselves did not become spooky skeletons. The scenario text does not give much guidance on how to progress the siege, or even how many skeletons to throw at the players, leaving the intensity entirely up to the keeper. This may be a stumbling point if a keeper does not decide ahead of time what kind of pace they are aiming for. Depending on how much time you have, you could have the skeletons immediately rush the party, using their sanity-blasting horns to disable the party, then gang up on individuals. This party is entirely made up of real chunky boys and girls, though, all having +1 builds, obviously for balance reasons, as there will be a lot of grappling in this scenario. But the mental image is still a bit silly once the players realize how big they all are. If you're aiming for a slower build-up, the skeletons can dance about in the graveyard for a longer time, occasionally using their sanity flute blast to soften up the party, and let them know they can't diddle-daddle around for too long. I suggest having every investigator at some point have a skeleton go after them, but to keep the combat from dragging on, have skeletons quickly dogpile investigators if they don't get free from their initial attacker. One other potential issue that others might have that came up in our game was an investigator trying to bury themselves. The party in my game scattered, with only 2 players actually making it to the graves, but at different times. I went with a series of dex rolls and occasionally a skeleton spot the living skill roll, ending with a final luck roll to see if they managed to keep silent throughout the night. I could see condensing it to a single luck roll, or simply not allowing investigators to bury themselves. In the end, only a single investigator survived the night in our game, unearthing themselves in the morning to find the graveyard silent, and searching around to find only the belongings from each of their perished friends. A suitably dire ending, and I won't deny that my favorite endings are ones with lone survivors. Notably, there are no NPCs in this scenario. If you want to lengthen the runtime and have a little bit of social skill use, one idea could be to add a drunk priest or a gravedigger who passed out in the church forgetting what day it was. They could panic on waking, and with some calming down and sobering up, give the players more hints, as well as adding a little moral dilemma as there are now 2 less graves. As with the first 2 Seeds of Terror scenarios, 1 less grave was great fun, and I fully plan on running it again in the future. Highly recommended. You can pick it up at DriveThruRPG individually or as part of a 3-set bundle, or through Type 40's Patreon page. Links in the show notes. Thank you for listening. If you want to hear the full story of my run of the game, I will soon have a narrative replay episode of this scenario, as well as a written version if my voice upsets you. And as always, thank you to CryoChamber for use of their album, Cthulhu. I do hope you come back next time for more reviews and replays. Have a good one.